Good evening, you fat entitled bastards. It's Mad Matt, and today I want to introduce to you a new show called Historical History. And what we're going to talk about today is D.B. Cooper. So what I've done is I've created a show based on me getting obliterated shit-faced drunk and trying to talk to you about history. Kind of like Drunken History, but more like a ripped-off, plagiarized version on shit that I looked up on Wikipedia. So, D.B. Cooper is one of the most notorious criminals in history, as that he stole 200 grand in money and was never seen again. They say that the man was dressed up in regular, let's say, street clothes, but like a business professional kind of thing. And he was able to escape justice. So D.B. Cooper hijacked a Boeing 727 between Seattle, Washington and Portland, Oregon, and extorted 200 grand and parachuted to an uncertain fate. Never found alive or dead by the FBI, he was never identified, and the remains his remains were never found. It's the only unsolved air piracy in American aviation history. For 45 years, they've never had an incident like this, and he most likely died on the jump. It began at mid-afternoon on a Portland, Oregon night. Portland International Airport on Thanksgiving Eve, November 24th, 1971, to Northwest Orient Airlines. Let's talk about that for a second. Like, what the fuck is Orient? Like, the Oriental Airlines? Like, the most racist way to say Asian, right? Clearly not around back in the day. So, he got on a Boeing 727-100 FAA-registered flight N467US and took his seat. He lit a cigarette and ordered a bourbon and soda. Well, yeah, you're gonna light a cigarette and a bourbon and soda in 1971 because you fucking can. Also, bourbon and soda is a delicious drink. Tonight I'm drinking a sour apple Mayday as part of the festivities of this whole interaction. So what we're gonna say is it's actually 1 part Sprite, 1 part green apple juice, 1 part sour apple mix, and a whole shitload of apple vodka. Brought to you by Smirnoff. So, what's going to end up happening is that the flight takes off. It's flight 305, and he looks like the mega ultra average white guy. And he lets the flight attendant know that he has a bomb, and what she does is she sits down next to him, and he opens up his bomb and shows her that he has like 8 cylinders with wires and shit and fucking detonation cores and all this other good shit sitting around. And what he does is he gives her a note written in very plain English. It's actually, they say that the actual writing was very legit, like it was very decipherable, I guess is the word, if it is a word. And they say that she goes up to the flight deck, and they basically set it up to where he puts out his demands. So the flight 305 takes off at 2:50 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and lets the flight attendant know he has a bomb. He shows her the bomb, and he demands 200 grand in negotiable American currency and 4 parachutes, 2 primary and 2 reserves, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the aircraft upon arrival. So, like, clearly he knows that the aircraft is already going to just be fueled for the flight, and that you just can't take over an aircraft, even in 1971, and figure out that, like, you're not going to make it to where you want to go because the flights are specifically fueled for these endeavors. And so what ends up happening is the pilot made it happen, and the 36 passengers were none the wiser, and they were told that there was a minor technical difficulty. Apparently, D.B. Cooper was very familiar with the terrain, and he knew they were near, like, Tacoma. And so, basically, when they landed in Seattle, Washington, they get the passengers off, and they just basically describe what's going to happen. Like, apparently he was very familiar with aviation control and the landscapes of those areas. So they also say that he is described as calm, polite, and well-spoken, and not at all the stereotypical hardened hijacker. Uh, he was basically just like this regular average dude, which is kind of weird, right? Because, like, you think that he's going to be like this super crazy guy with a gun on an airplane, smoking a cigarette and slinging booze and doing all this other crazy shit, and he ends up being this super calm, like, average guy in aviator shades and a suit and a long coat. So Neo from the Matrix essentially hijacks this plane, and it's like, whatever, cool, super great. The pilot keeps calm, the engineer keeps calm, the stewardess keeps calm, and the passengers have no idea what the fuck's going on. So, nowadays that shit would never fly because of the 9/11 incident. And with all the other shit going on with aviation now, and that joke that is the TSA, you couldn't get a nail clipper past those motherfuckers. But apparently you can still sneak bombs and shit like that because they're totally inept, and the entire like figurative like collective of that unit is completely corrupt. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about DB Cooper tonight. So he ends up getting into the Seattle airport, and apparently DB Cooper is just calm, super collected, never lets anybody know what is going on. So he orders another bourbon and water, paid his drink tab, and even offered to tip the stewardess, and offered a meal request for the flight crew and when they reach Seattle. The whole ransom was offered with recorded unmarked 20s, and he didn't want military chutes, so they were going to give him his parachutes, but they were never going to give him the parachutes that he wanted. They were offering up these military grade, like, 101st Airborne style fucking parachutes. And he wanted standard parachutes packed by regular people. And so what ended up happening is he gets 2 parachutes from a local skydiving school instead. At 5:24 p.m., he was informed that his demands had been met, and the operations manager of the airline came in plain clothes to deliver the money. Apparently, they didn't want him thinking like a cop was trying to come drop off the money to him or whatever. So he then let everyone but the pilots leave the plane, and they took off. He outlined the flight path that the crew and had been very specific with the plans for the plane and operational controls. The pilots and he came to the conclusion that they would need to refuel at Reno, Nevada, because everybody was under the assumption that he was going to be flying to Mexico, which was obviously now not the plan. So DB Cooper had originally decided that to basically let everybody think, I'm going to Mexico, fuck the bullshit, I'm going to go out there and fucking rock shit. And what ends up happening is that he decides it's much smarter to jump off before that point, just to basically throw a wrench in the giddy up there. And so what ends up happening is that he has a couple of plans for the plane, and the pilot and the engineer were basically the only guys left on that plane. So he, when he outlined the plans, he said that he wanted to take off with the rear door open and the staircase deployed. The airline said it would be unsafe, and he was like, bullshit, it totally is going to work. And they're like, no, we're not going to take off with that shit. Kill everybody, we don't care. And then basically he was like, you know what, fuck the bullshit. We can take off with the landing gear inside the plane, but as soon as we take off, literally when we hit air control, we're literally going to drop that staircase, fuck the bullshit. So what ends up happening is he takes off with the pilot and the flight engineer, And unknown to Cooper, a pair of F-106s are actually below and above the aircraft out of eyesight. And he never knows or never hears that these planes are actually deployed, but like he knows that there's like I'm assuming that if the man knows what the topographical control, and he knows about like the flight aviation standards, that he's pretty sure that they're going to be tailed. And the entire time the plane is on craft, there is actually another plane shadowing them, in addition to the other two planes, and or fighter pilots. And what ends up happening is after they took off with only the pilot and a flight engineer, he opens the hatch and deploys the staircase. And so the actual flight crew has no idea what's going on. They don't even know if he's jumped or not. And so when they land in Nevada, they end up finding out that he's gone. So the engineer ends up checking the plane, and he just like Kaiser Soze, poof, gone. The FBI searched a non-precise landing zone because there's no idea as to when it is that he actually jumped out of the plane, and they never actually discovered his body alive or dead. Now, that being said, they did find some of the marked bills, unmarked registered bills, in the river that was going on below them. And so the theory is that D.B. Cooper leapt from the plane and never survived. But the heart of me says that my man's escaped with like something like $180,000. Maybe he threw a couple bucks out to just kind of discourage the search for him or whatever. So there's two theories. He either survived with some money, three theories, I guess. Survived with some money, survived with no money, or died plainly and ended up drowning to death in the river. D.B. Cooper, the only man who's ever evaded the FAA and the FBI with a stint of air piracy. This has been Hysterical History with Mad Matt, and I wish you a very good night.